Good morning and welcome to This Day in History for October 27th. October 27th is the 300th day in the year in the Gregorian calendar, with 65 days remaining until the end of the year. Holy cow, there were so many birthdays and deaths for today. So many. I mean, like 8 pages of single-spaced. I can't imagine how long it would have taken to get through all those births and deaths. So we just picked out a few births and deaths to sprinkle in with the other events of things that happened on this day in history. So today we'll start back in the year 312, when Constantine was said to have received his famous vision of the cross. As I recall, he received this vision of the cross, and then the next day he was victorious in battle. And the rest, as they say, is history. October 27 of 1275 is considered the traditional founding of the city of Amsterdam. It gets that designation because that's when it appeared in written documents. Amsterdam is the capital and most populous city of the Netherlands and is colloquially referred to as the Venice of the North due to its large number of locks and canals. As old as Amsterdam is, it's not the oldest city in the Netherlands. Amsterdam got its name after some locals built a dam to prevent or avert flooding from the Amstel River. By all reports, Amsterdam sounds like a very interesting city, but we won't take up all of today's time talking about it. I would like to mention, however, that the Van Gogh Museum is in Amsterdam, so if there are any artists or art appreciators planning a trip to Europe, consider checking out the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. In 1659, Quakers were executed for their religious beliefs. William Robinson and Marmaduke Stevenson, 2 Quakers who came from England in 1656 to escape religious persecution, were executed by the Massachusetts Bay Colony for their religious beliefs. These two had violated a law passed by the Massachusetts General Court the year before banning Quakers from the colony under penalty of death. It's hard for me to imagine Quakers are so peaceful. Why would anybody want to kill them? But the Religious Society of Friends, whose members are commonly known as Quakers, was a Christian movement founded by George Fox in England during the early 1650s. Quakers opposed Central Church authority. Well, that's why they were targeted. They opposed Central Church authority, preferring to seek spiritual insight and consensus through egalitarian Quaker meetings. They advocated sexual equality and became some of the most outspoken opponents of slavery in early America. Robinson and Stevenson, who were hanged from an elm tree in Boston Common in Boston, were the first Quakers to be executed in America. Quakers found solace in Rhode Island and other colonies, and Massachusetts anti-Quaker laws were later repealed. What a relief. 1682, William Penn, an English Quaker, founded the city of Philadelphia in 1682 to serve as the capital of the Pennsylvania colony. 1775. You might remember that a couple days ago we talked about the Continental Congress sending a respectful petition to the King of England in 1774 to complain about acts of oppression forced upon the colonies by the British Parliament. Now bear in mind, this was way before anything like telegraphs, so messages had to travel, like everything else, over land and sea, so it would take a few months for any messages to be delivered. So the colonies had sent that petition, and it gave the king an opportunity to get real mad. They'd had some correspondence, and the king put his foot down. The American colonists saying, no, but wait. Kind of like the kind of battles that go on in a household when children reach adolescence and their parents still want to be the boss. That's what it sounds like to me. So on this day, October 27 of 1775, King George basically pitched a fit and issued the Proclamation of Rebellion, declaring that the American colonies were in a state of open and avowed rebellion and ordering officials of the British Empire to use their utmost endeavors to withstand and suppress such rebellion. This proclamation basically crossed in the mail with yet another document known as the Olive Branch Petition from the Continental Congress, but the King's Proclamation was written before the Colonial Secretary Lord Dartmouth had been given a copy of the Olive Branch Petition, and the King refused to receive the petition, so the proclamation effectively served as an answer to it. And baby, it was on then. 1858, American colonel and politician and 26th President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, was born in New York City on this date in 1858. He died in 1919 at the age of 60. 1873, Joseph Glidden applied for a patent on his barbed wire design. Barbed wire had existed before this, but he improved on the design by using the twisted wire to hold the barbs in place. He's an Illinois farmer, and he submitted an application to the U.S. Patent Office for his clever new design for this fencing wire with sharp barbs, an invention that would forever change the face of the American West. In 1904, the first underground subway line opened in New York City. In 1920, American actress, singer, and dancer, the beautiful Nanette Fabray, was born on this date in 1920. She died in 2018 at the age of 97. 1923, pop art painter Roy Lichtenstein was born. He died in 1997 at the age of 73. He sure made some interesting art. You should look it up. He did big oil on canvas paintings of cartoons, basically, with conversation bubbles. Fascinating work. In 1932, on this date, the poet Sylvia Plath was born in Boston. Her father was a German immigrant and a professor of biology and a leading expert on bumblebees. He died at home after a lingering illness that consumed the energy of the entire household and left the family penniless. Sylvia's mother went back to work as a teacher and raised her 2 children alone. An outstanding student, Plath won a scholarship to Smith and published her first short story, Sunday at the Mittens, in Mademoiselle while she was still in college. She won a summer job as a guest managing editor at the magazine as well. After that job ended, she suffered a nervous breakdown and tried to commit suicide. She was hospitalized for this. She returned to school to finish her senior year, won a Fulbright to England, and went to Cambridge after graduation, where she met poet Ted Hughes in February of 1956. They married 4 months later. Plath took a job teaching at Smith, which she kept for a year before quitting to write full-time. She and Hughes lived in Boston, and she attended poetry workshops with Robert Lowell, whose confessional approach to poetry deeply influenced her. Hughes won a Guggenheim Fellowship in 1959, and the couple returned to England, where Plath had her first child. Her first poetry collection, Colossus, was published in 1960 to favorable reviews. The couple bought a house in Devon and had a second child in 1962, the same year that Plath discovered her husband was having an affair. He left the family to move in with his lover, and Plath desperately struggled against her own emotional turmoil and depression. She moved to London and wrote dozens of her best poems in the winter of 1962. Her only novel, The Bell Jar, a semi-autobiographical account of a college girl who works at a magazine in New York and suffers a breakdown, was published in early 1963 but received mediocre reviews. With sick children, frozen pipes, and a severe case of depression, Plath took her own life in February of 1963 at age 30, a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Hughes edited several volumes of her poetry which appeared after her death, including Ariel, Crossing the Water, and Collected Poems, which won the Pulitzer Prize in 1982. 1933, American pianist and singer Floyd Kramer was born on this date. He died in 1997 at the age of 64. 1936, Mrs. Wallace Simpson obtained her divorce, which would eventually allow her to marry King Edward VIII of the United Kingdom, thus forcing his abdication from the throne. 1939, English actor, comedian, screenwriter, and producer John Cleese was born on this date, making him 80 years old today. Happy birthday, John Cleese. 1940, American mob boss and mafia head of the Bambino family, John Gotti, was born in the Bronx, New York, on this date in 1940. Nicknamed the Dapper Don due to his polished appearance and expensive suits, and the Teflon Don because of how often charges against him just didn't stick. Eventually, he was convicted for the types of things mob bosses do and spent the rest of his life in prison. He died in 2002 at the age of 61. 1962, the United States and Soviet Union stepped back from the brink of nuclear war. Complicated and tension-filled negotiations between the United States and the Soviet Union finally resulted in a plan to end the two-week Cuban Missile Crisis. A frightening period in which nuclear holocaust seemed imminent began to come to an end. In 1970, Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber released Jesus Christ Superstar, a concept album. In 1970, Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber released the concept album Jesus Christ Superstar. Oh, what a hit that was, man. I had me a copy of that one. From the late 1950s to the mid-60s, it was common for original cast recordings of successful Broadway musicals to find their way up near the top of pop album charts. Hit shows like West Side Story, The Sound of Music, Funny Girl, among several others, all spun off million-selling albums during this era, but by the late 60s, the pop album charts had been decisively taken over by rock. It was in this environment that a young British composer and his lyricist partner managed to achieve a massive success by precisely reversing the old formula. On October 27, 1970, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, who would go on to become the most successful composer-lyricist team in modern theater history, released a double LP concept album called Jesus Christ Superstar, which only later would become the smash hit Broadway musical of the same name. 1994, the U.S. prison population exceeds 1 million. The U.S. Justice Department announced that the U.S. prison population had topped 1 million for the first time in American history. The figure, 1,012,851 men and women were in state and federal prisons, and this did not even include local prisons where an estimated 500,000 prisoners were held, usually for short periods. The recent increase, due to tougher sentencing laws, made the United States second only to Russia in the world for incarceration rates. In 2004, the Red Sox win the first championship since 1918. The Boston Red Sox defeated the St. Louis Cardinals to win their first World Series in 86 years. Oh, my God. Oh, mercy. Finally vanquishing the so-called curse of the Bambino that had plagued them for 86 years. I can't believe I'm choking up on this one. This is for anyone who has ever rooted for the Red Sox, the team's GM told reporters after the game. This is for all the Red Sox nation, past and present. I lived in Cooperstown when that happened, and while I do love me some St. Louis Cardinals, I sure had to root for those Red Sox. It was one exciting night at our house and throughout the entire village of Cooperstown, and I guess all over the rest of the country too. Oh, well, there's more news after this, but this was the happiest thing I could find, so we're going to let that wrap it up for us today on this day, October 27. Thanks for watching. As always, links to my research are in the show notes. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and feel free to share this video. Share it all over the place if you enjoyed it at all, if you found it interesting or informative. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. On October, okay, with the notifications. Blah, 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 coffee mug. Oh, for crying out loud. Thank you for reminding me. All right. Now, where were we? Roman numerals. Is that right? Sure would be nice if I could ever read one of these in its entirety without having to start anything over. That would be awesome. I might have to take another look at that. I'm going to have to look at that. So, plumbing happens. This is why I don't do live shows.